Hey everybody, welcome. Well, I'm sure you've heard welcome a lot today, but welcome again to World Tour. Welcome again to the state of marketing. We're going to talk, there's a lot of reserved seating up the front here, and I have no reserved seating for me, so people come up the front. There's plenty of seating here. We're going to talk about the state of marketing. 4,100 marketing leaders around the world, including here in Australia and New Zealand, for the Kiwis in the audience, told us how they're running their business, how they're running their organizations, changes in the organization, changes in technology, changes in data, what are the new channels they're running. Basically, we want to give you benchmarks that you can compare against for your organization, things that you can look to help you decide whether you're driving ROI, and other things that sort of define the innovative path that marketing is always on the forefront of. At the end, I'll show you, sure, you can take pictures throughout. We'll look at a lot of numbers. But at the end, I'll show you where you can download the fuller reports and share it with your teams for the state of marketing and some other data points that we're going to be talking about. And if you see something you like, hashtag state of marketing on whatever your favorite social channel is. Now, I'm sure often when you guys hear industry reports and trends, you sort of bow your head a little bit because things become very North American or very Eurocentric. I think I'm in a unique position to help you have the juxtaposition of what's going on in the globe versus what's going on here in region in Australia and New Zealand. So I haven't introduced myself. My name is Chris. I've been at Salesforce for 5 years. I'm responsible for our marketing cloud go-to-market and our thought leadership. But I'm also a native here. I was born and grew up in Melbourne, and while the last 12 years of my life have been in the US and been in technology, I can probably uniquely understand the juxtaposition that you guys all face, seeing the trends that exist that might be US dollar, US or European-centric, and translate it back to things that are relevant to you, translate it back to the industries and things and tactics that are relevant to you, and things that are not things that make no sense for your own market. So, let's dive into all this. So if I could sum up everything before, let's state a high-level view. In this path of us going from one-to-many and one-to-one marketing, if we could really distill down, if this whole presentation was one thing, it would be this. We are all striving to create personalized experiences for our end customers, B2C and B2B. 76% of customers, B2C and B2B, say they expect personalized experiences from all of us. You expect it of Salesforce, your customers expect it of you. However, those same people say they're uncomfortable with the companies having their data. Now, I don't know about you, but I have no idea, and maybe someone can raise their hand, but I have no idea how to create a personalized experience without data. And it's the solving of this fundamental challenge that will define our success going forward. Just some other high-level stats, and this number here is in Australian dollars. So advertising is obviously a big part of marketing. It's a $17 billion industry here. And this is the one stat. Most things that we look at regionally will be Australia and New Zealand together. This is Australia specific. So a lot of money. That's why this is important, spread across these channels. And 30% of this total is mobile. So it's very important. Digital is obviously the dominant part. Now within this, just for context actually, just to show you how big $17 billion is, if advertising was a market cap on the Australian Stock Exchange, it'd be the 22nd largest company. This is as at March the 1st. So bigger than QBE and not too far off all the others. And this is just advertising for the paid amount of money, not the services, the creative, the technology, the operations around it. That would make the industry even bigger. Now, as it relates to digital, the component, that's 10 billion of that 17 spread across these channels. Now, one way Australia is very unique versus any other region in the world, if you add up those numbers, you'll see that they don't go very close to 100. They're a fair way away. Now, there's always a miscellaneous in every region when you look at this, but the reason why that gap is so big in Australia is because there's a component of advertising called digital classifieds that is dominated here by the two big real estate sites, and that is where a large portion of that miscellaneous funds go. Property is obviously a very big thing here. Okay, so let's talk about the state of marketing. As I mentioned, it's 4,100 marketing leaders from around the world, so basically everywhere in terms of continents except for Africa. As you can see, the Asia-Pacific region has more people surveyed in this report than North America, the US and Canada. So this is truly a global report and not, like many things, US-centric. We cover all industries. Hopefully, all of you here are represented by someone up there. And the good thing is that we have industry-specific data. So if you're a retailer or a media person, there's cuts of this data that exist in the report itself that we'll show you at the end that you can download. We also cover every type of company, except for the very small. So small, medium, enterprise. We cover all types of company, B2C, B2B, and the increasingly popular hybrid model. And importantly, this is marketing leaders, decision makers. People were filtered out if they didn't own P&L, didn't own a function. So you can see here, approximately little over 40% or 41% are either CEO, founder, or CMO. So these are the key decision makers at organizations around the world, representing all these different sizes of organization. Maybe some of you were surveyed. It's important to note this was done in a double-blind way, meaning that the people who were surveyed did not know that Salesforce was the one running this research, and we did not know the end person who was being surveyed. That keeps the bias out of the results, where we're not picking the respondents, and they are not biased in giving the response, knowing that it's us conducting the research. The one final demographic thing before we get into the numbers is this. We asked, in also asking about demographics in terms of company size and who they are, we also asked them qualifier questions related to their marketing investment, how satisfied they are, how well they're going. And then we group them into high performers, moderate performers, and underperformers based on those results. Why that's important is that when we ask the actual questions, we can bucket them by going, well, how did the high-performing marketers answer this versus the underperformers, and start to look at that data cut across every question that we ask. Okay, so let's get into the numbers. There were 4 key findings that came out of this research. Number one is this idea of experience. We talked about it earlier that customers are demanding experience, demanding a personalized experience. Well, marketing, the CMO, the marketing function, is increasingly at the center of that and owning it. This is not just about the marketing channels. This is the entire experience, every part of the brand that touches the customer, post-sales, e-commerce if that's part of your experience, direct selling if you're a B2B organization. Marketing is owning and increasingly taking ownership of the goals and metrics on behalf of the brand. 2, data's growing. Not surprising, I think we all know that. But we want to be specific, and we'll show you the specific amount of data that marketers are using and marketers here in region. But what's that creating? What is all this increase in data creating? It's creating some trust issues, which we'll talk about, but it's also identity. If I'm using all these different data sources from all these different technology stacks, I have to connect them all together and work out person A in system 1, person A in system 2, person A in system 3. So identity is becoming the critical challenge of data. Personalization that we talked about is important, but as we are scaling up in all this data, the only way we can personalize at scale is through artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, natural language processing as voice becomes a bigger thing. But as AI and data become a core part of what we do, trust, and I think we've seen over the last 12 months with companies that we won't name, trust has become a core issue in terms of consumers and the B2B and B2C side with the brands. And we saw earlier that customers are not trusting brands with their data. And last and not least, we still operate in a channel world. We still market and marketing in channels. The number one thing that's dominating the channel revolution for the marketer is real time. In fact, it's dominating so much it's become the number one thing across all of marketing. And we'll get to that in a second. Okay, so let's dive into these trends. Trend number 1, marketing taking on a new role in the organization. 80% of customers are saying the experience that a brand provides is as important, not half as important, not 75% as important, but as important as the product or service. That's crazy, right? Like, it doesn't matter how good. It's so hard to deliver a good product or a good service, but now that's not enough. It's the experience that they have with you that's as important as what that is. And if you look, and I mentioned this high performer, moderate, underperformer before, if you look at the disparate answers, high-performing marketers, to a slight majority, are satisfied with their ability to deliver on this experience across channels. But moderate and underperformers, the majority of people, are struggling. So there's a massive maturity curve between what brands are doing and even the high performers. It's not the overwhelming majority that are able to deliver on this experience imperative. Why is this important? Well, a majority of people, 57%, are saying they will switch to your competitors, not because your product or service has an issue, but because the experience is a problem. That sucks. That really, really sucks. You deliver a great product or service and they're switching because of experience. There is good news though. If you look at the right-hand side here, if you solve for this, they will actually pay more for the same product or service because the experience is better. So you can charge a premium on your product or service now because if you deliver on a good experience. Makes this imperative great in this hyper-competitive global world we're all in. So what's marketing doing about it? Now, every time you see that flag at the top, and I apologize, it's the Australian flag, it means Australia and New Zealand, so blank out the big star if you're New Zealanders, if you're Kiwis in the audience, and pretend the other stars are red. But 46% of Australia and New Zealand marketers are leading experience. And as I said, leading experience means not just marketing, but across the business, leading on experience on behalf of the brand. So that's how they're trying to solve for this. There's a difference between the high performers. You can see 54% versus the underperformers, 31%. But marketing is increasingly taking ownership of this. As part of doing that, they have to get their own shit right within marketing itself. And we all know, particularly those of you that work in direct marketing and advertising, there's always been this historical silo that's existed between the technology stacks, the people, the agencies as part of the dynamic. It's nice to see, and this trend is continuing around the world and here in Australia and New Zealand, that 88%, so the vast majority, just has grown every year, have started to integrate their two stacks together. So it's sort of at the point where it's now become the standard. If we go beyond just marketing, because if marketing is owning experience and owning the goals and metrics on behalf of the brand, they have to work with other teams. So here in region, where there's an e-commerce team as part of the organization, 49%, so almost a majority is sharing goals and metrics. Where there's a direct selling organization, 49% also sharing goals and metrics. And I think most organizations have a post-sales customer service team, and just on 50%. This is slightly under the global numbers for all of these, but it's nice to see they're at a mass where we can start to solve for these cross-experience type issues. Okay, trend number 2. Data. I mentioned there's lots of hurdles and opportunities with data, but we also wanted to make it more specific, things that you could actually benchmark against. Everyone says data is growing, great. What does that actually mean? Let's talk about it. 46% of marketers in region here are saying they have a unified view of their customers. They're actually connecting stacks together. Now, they may not be happy. The question was, are they happy with the unified view? Are they able to use the unified view? They're just saying they have it. Now, the right-hand side is where it gets more interesting. This is looking at the exact amount of data sources that marketers here in region are using to run their campaigns and operations. And when we say data sources, what we mean is email performance data would be a data source. Point of sale data would be a data source. Advertising click-through rates would be a data source. So when we say 10 up there, that means the marketing function in the year 2017 here in Australia and New Zealand were using 10 data sources to run their campaigns and operations, growing to 12 in 2018 and 15 in this current year. Sorry, did I say 2015? 2018, 15. Incidentally, these numbers mirror the global numbers across each of these 3 years. And as you can see, it's growing exponentially. Now, the interesting thing, and I think you'll appreciate this, often that when you have 10, 12, 15, that might mean 10, 12, and 15 different technology stacks. So you're actually having to reconcile 15 different technology stacks to even be able to execute on this. So what does that mean? That means that we have to solve for identity. And here's where this spectrum exists. High performers are far more likely to be able to solve for identity or satisfied with the ability to solve identity than underperformers, not surprising. But what are they using to solve for identity? What technologies are they using? When we asked this question, we gave people a range plus an other, and almost all people selected multiple, because I'm pretty confident that these days no one has found this unified view of a customer where they're using a single technology. Not yet anyway. So this is the ranking order, and these are global numbers, by the way, in order of the top technologies in ranking order that people are using to solve for identity. I don't think necessarily the order here matters, and I don't think necessarily any individual thing here matters, because I think none of these things up here are surprising. The common technologies that exist in marketing that solve for identity and solve for everything else that we're doing in marketing. What's important is that people are using this to do it. Because if I'm going to deliver on a personalized experience, I need data, and with that data, I need to unify it to a common identity across the experience. Now, we all know first-party data is the most valuable data that we have, and third-party data is pretty crap. The only way I can extend on beyond first-party data is with second-party data. I'm sure most of you know what that is. In simple terms, it's other first-party data. And in tracking this trend over the last few years, it's grown. It's been the fastest growing source of new data for most brands across the world. And here you can see in region, 65% of marketers in region are using second-party data. Mainly they're using it through data management platforms as the core technology to bring that into the ecosystem and to connect it with other data they have at the brand side. Now, I mentioned data management platforms. You saw that in the slide before as one of the key technologies that are solving for identity, and obviously a key part of the marketing stack. The data management platform itself is going through a transformation. This is global data. Now, historically, as most of you may know, this technology existed, was conceived around about 2006-07, and existed to solve for advertising business goals. So on the left-hand side here, you're looking at the past 12 months, the top 10 in order use cases people said they use that technology for. If you look at number 1, number 2, number 3, number 5, all of them relate very closely, directly, or pretty closely to advertising use cases. What we asked on the right-hand side is, what do you plan to use this technology for? Not plan in 5 years, plan in the next 12 months, meaning 2019. Look at how that's changed. Analytic insights, audience insights, discovery, identity that we talked about. That's a fundamental change going on with the exact same technology. Technology hasn't changed. I mean, there's iterative improvement, of course. But this isn't like ripping and replacing something brand new. I noticed this myself anecdotally. I do a lot of selling, and you noticed in the room you'd have chief analytic officers and data scientists often in the room, where before it was just the people who owned media, owned advertising, and their agency partners. This is a really interesting trend that's going on, and we look forward to seeing how this progresses. Okay, let's talk about trend 3, AI. And I think this is one way to look at it. If you look at modern personalization, it's the intersection of these two things, AI and solving for trust. Now, AI is growing and growing in terms of its use by marketers. In and of itself, I don't even like this stat much, other than to just show the fact that AI is growing. Because in and of itself, there's nothing you can benchmark here. All you can tell your boss and people that you work with is that AI is growing. Yes, it is growing because we need it. Okay, so let's get a little bit more specific. How is it growing? Here in region, 25% of marketers are saying, here in New Zealand, they're actually using AI to run campaigns. That is certainly not a majority. But it is a growing rate. A little more are using voice-activated assistants as part of their marketing program, probably in experimental ways. This is certainly not a core part of the program yet. Now, these other two numbers start to get interesting, because we didn't test for this before, and this has come up at a much larger rate, the balance of personalization and privacy. And we expect this number to keep growing. And certainly in some regions around the world, particularly where privacy exists at a greater level, think Europe, places like Germany, this number is a lot higher. But it's balance of personalization and privacy, and brands going beyond what regulations or internal standards demand in terms of delivering on marketing. The good news is ultimately that personalization improves marketing, so this fight to balance personalization and trust and consent is important. Okay, so let's go deeper. Let's talk about the tactics that AI is being used for, because that's not a level that most people talk about. Too often when we talk about AI, We talk about this idea of virtual reality, reimagining the entire brand experience. And if you're a marketer, it's like, well, that's great, I'd love to do it, but I don't have an unlimited budget, and I have goals I have to hit next month, next quarter. What are the things I can actually do that are within my realm of scope, that I can use AI for to actually solve for a business goal my boss is judging me on, that can make me hit and get my bonus? Well, the average marketer globally are using AI in 2 different ways. And if you look at these things around the wheel here, these are things that you can tangibly touch as a marketer. Next best offers, predictive journeys, melding online and offline experiences, namely things like connecting my website to the in-store experience and point of sale if I'm a retailer, or connecting my website and app to the experience I might have at an ATM for a financial services institution. These are actual things that you can actually solve for today that don't involve reimagining your entire experience, but can actually get the benefit of using AI. Marketers expect to do 4 more additional use cases by next year, so a total of 6. But most of those use cases will come from what you see around this wheel, not the sci-fi view of the world. That will come. But these are the tangible things that are happening in market today. Now, to do this, I need to solve for trust. I need to grab my audience's, my customers' consent. Now, it's not surprising there's a big maturity spectrum here. High performers are way more satisfied with the ability to balance personalization and privacy than underperformers. And overall, the growth rate of this idea of balancing personalization and privacy has come right to the fore. Now, often when you see trends as it relates to trust and privacy, people will stop here and say, this is a big problem and these are the numbers to back it up. What we want to go is go a step deeper. How can you get customers to give you their data? What are the things you need to do so they will give you their data willingly in the consent so you can run the programs that you want to run? These are the 4 things. We released this report about the state of trust, the trends in customer trust in September, and I'll show you how you can get that at the end. But if you do these 4 things, customers will, to the overwhelming majority, give you their data, and they seem logical, but I'll explain them quickly. Explain how data is going to improve the experience. In plain language, explicitly, tell them, if I have X, you'll get Y. Ask permission, but ask permission in a way that they know you're asking their permission, not in some hidden way, not some underpop of accepting cookies on the side. Tell them, can I have your data so I can do this? Be transparent. And if the use of the data is changing for some reason, tell them. Be explicit. And the last one, in some ways, is the most important. And it's not surprising it's the highest number here. 92% will give you their data if you do this well. Give them control. And there's 2 things I'll suggest here. If you are a marketer running RFPs and technology selection processes, ask the vendors to show you the consent dashboard in the technology. Show me where the user of the technology can see all the consent that all the data has in the system, and ideally, can I flip that system such that my users can see the consent they've given on the data, and they can opt in and opt out for each different part. It's important, but if you do it, 92% say they'll give you their data. Now, as marketers, we say that channel engagement matters. Of course it matters. So many of you are involved in optimizing a specific channel. Every year, we ask people what their top priorities and top challenges are across the entire business. This is the 5th year we're running. It's the longest running research report at Salesforce. And for the very first time, the thing that was number 1 for priority was the same for challenges. Engaging with customers in real time. Why? I have 2 hypotheses, or one that's backed up by data. As you can see on the right-hand side, customers want it. Instant on-demand engagement, not just B2C, but B2B. In fact, B2B want it more. So real time is important because the end customer wants it. But 2, if you think about the world we live in, I pull out my phone, I order a ride on demand. My flight is delayed, I go into the airline app, I change on demand. I go to point of sale, I change something, and I get my order delivered directly because it's not in store. Everything I do with the brands I love is on demand in real time. It's not surprising that this is the thing that marketers are prioritizing above all other things in their organization. It's also really, really hard to do, which is why so few people do it well, and certainly at scale, and certainly across the experience. So it's not surprising, again, why it's the #1 challenge. There's lots of other big challenges and priorities too, common to all of you, I'm sure, but real time has taken the cake for this year. The spectrum is great, so there's route, right message, right channel, right time. The high performers, the ones who say they're doing it well, 8.1 times versus the underperformers. Now, we want to be specific, and we want to again give you benchmarks, like with data and some of the AI things, that you can actually look at. So we asked people, what are your highest ROI channels per business goal? So the business goals across the life cycle, brand building, acquisition, lead generation, all the way to advocacy. And obviously the web is a big companion part of all of this. But for the first, we've never asked a question like this before, but here you're looking at the top 3 per business goal. And while we've never asked a question like this before, when you notice social is in all of these, and this is organic and paid social together, social's never come up that high, certainly not across the spectrum in terms of ROI versus other channels, certainly not to this level. My hypothesis is, what have we been talking about? Real-time, personalization, AI. If you think about social media as a channel, the newsfeed is a real-time thing. Responding in customer service on Twitter is a real-time experience. Instagram stories, Snapchat, they're real-time experiences. Social by its very nature is a real-time channel. So delivering on real-time in social is a lot easier in some ways than it is elsewhere. And so maybe that is why social's coming up high. Elsewhere, you see email obviously higher when you know the customer for upselling and retention, and things like video and IoT, connected TVs, connected billboards, doing better when it comes to brand building. It's good to know that here in region that at least we're achieving real time to some extent. Almost half are saying I'm at least getting real time in one channel, maybe more. And we expect that obviously to grow if it's a priority for the organization. But if we were to dig deeper into that, a lot of marketing is still siloed. 32% here in region are saying the channels are siloed. 44% are saying a duplicate, meaning that the same offer I might send on the email campaign I have out is the same offer someone will see on the web. But duplicate means it's not responsive. So if I've taken action on that email offer, the web doesn't up-to-date. That's what dynamic is, where if I've taken action in one channel, it's responsive in the other. So in driving for real time, this is what we're solving for, and this is what the state of the world is here in Australia and New Zealand. A couple of final thoughts. I think the bugbear of most marketers, and has been for decades, and probably will be for decades to come, is measurement. Measurement is hard, particularly in a real-time, AI-driven, data-everywhere world. These are the top 5 metrics, and this goes down to 20 and 25, but these are the top 5 metrics tracked in region that people are running their business on and optimizing their campaigns on here in Australia and New Zealand. It's nice to know that you see revenue growth up the top there. So often marketers have been accused of just running on marketing goals like web traffic or CPAs, CPM, CTRs. So this is a business metric here. But it's not easy to optimize to something like this, particularly for tactical goals that we do. But if we can, maybe we can deliver on that experience imperative, that personalized experience that we want to. I have a feeling that marketers will probably bucket up measurement into these 3 broad categories going forward. Pipeline basically meaning all the metrics that exist in getting a customer, selling to them for the first time, upselling. Satisfaction being the overall experience, because if marketing's going to own experience, I don't just own CSAT or Net Promoter Scores, I own the ability for that customer to be satisfied with my brand in all ways. And lifetime value, ultimately the combination of the two. What's the revenue of my customer? What's the satisfaction of the customer? What's the advocacy of the customer? How are they helping me get new customers? Because they are your best advocate, better than any other form of marketing you'll ever do. I promised you that you could easily get all the reports. So you see State of Marketing, the 3rd one there. If you go to that URL or send it to your colleagues or anyone, you can download the full report. And at the end, it goes into depth per region. And for those of you that deal with other regions in Asia Pacific, we have Singapore, Hong Kong. You have the trust report. We talked a lot about trust trends here. Connect the customer, what are customer preferences, how are they changing, and advertising specifically. I hope this gave you something tangible for the state of marketing, something you can compare against, deliver strategy on, and not just be like these esoteric concepts that sort of are far beyond what your day-to-day reality is. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of World Tour.